Hey, how's it going? How you doing? How have you been? And welcome to my SHROOMLESS Shortcuts in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Part 2. I'll be going over some NISCs that I didn't cover last time, and some DLC ones that weren't released yet. I also was able to get a controller cam, however I apologize that it's an Xbox controller. I tried looking for a Pro Controller skin, but just couldn't find one unfortunately, but I hope the input display is still helpful. And before getting into it, I want to quickly go over some small tech that I will be mentioning and using throughout the video. So, let's get into it. So, here are some techniques that I'll be using throughout the video. First off, soft drifting. Soft drifting can be described as charging a mini turbo at the same speed you would as going tight, but without going tight. Here's an example. I have a dedicated video for this, but you ideally want to have your stick at this angle to perform a soft drift. Next is neutral drifting. Neutral drifting is when you are drifting around a corner and have your stick in the neutral position. This is useful because your kart is faster than when drifting wide or tight. However, you charge mini turbos a lot slower. Here's an example of neutral drifting. Next is counter hopping or hopping. Counter hopping, or hopping, is just when you tap the drift button and turn the stick either left or right to hop in that direction. This is used to align yourself before or after a turn, or to build up a higher tier of mini turbo before a turn. Here's an example. Lastly is sliding. Sliding is basically a drift where you don't charge a mini turbo and is mainly used to adjust and realign yourself for an upcoming turn. Here's an example of sliding. An indication for a slide is smoke coming off the back tires. But with all that, let's get into the SHROOMLESS shortcuts. Starting off with the Tokyo Blur NISC. Now this one is super easy to do, so let's get it over with. After releasing your UMT on the straightaway, position yourself to the left side of the track next to the wall. Then start a left soft drift to build up a quick mini turbo and release it into a right hop into a right drift. Soft drift initially, then hold wide to position yourself for the right side of the ramp. And as you're about to go into the grass, release your mini turbo into a left hop to clear the grass, then trick off the ramp. And that's it. It's that simple. The only tip I have is to stay as left as you can before the ramp because there's less grass to clear. Other than that, the timing for releasing your mini turbo and hopping is pretty forgiving. But with that, let's move on to Sydney Sprint. Now Sydney Sprint's NISC is very satisfying to pull off and is super useful when front running. So let's see how to do it. After coming off the glider, position yourself near the right wall and perform a left slide into a right soft drift. Stay as close to the wall as possible and aim for the very corner of the ramp. Then, when close enough, release your mini turbo and trick as late as possible to clear the fence. And there you go, that's how you do the Sydney Sprint NISC. Now this one is tricky to learn, especially because it's on lap 2 and can take a while to get back, but the biggest tip for learning this one is to stay as close to the wall and aim for the very corner of the ramp like I said before, because if you're even slightly too far to the left, there's a very low chance you'll make it over. But now let's move on to Wild Woods. Now Wild Woods NISC is easier to learn in my opinion, but can be hard to actually save time with because it's easy to lose too much momentum when attempting it. But let's see how to do it. So, after the boost panels, you want to trick off the last one, and after you land, start a left drift and position yourself so that you're tricking off on this arrow. Trick off the ramp and land into a quick right slide to align yourself to the right. Then, as you're about to go into the grass, do a left hop into a right hop into a trick off the ramp to clear the gap. And there you go, that's how you do the Wild Woods NISC. Now the biggest tip I have for this one is to stay as far right as possible before the grass because there is less off-road to slow you down before the ramp. But with that, let's move on to Mute City. Now Mute City's NISC is one of the trickier ones to figure out when you're first learning it, but it's definitely worth learning because it can save a full second over going the normal route. So let's see how to do it. As you are coming around the hard right turn, release your UMT into a left soft drift to release a quick mini turbo on the boost panel. Then start a right drift right after the boost panel and soft drift initially, then neutral drift and stay as close to the wall as possible because there is a slight incline on the track that will give you the necessary air to clear the off-road. Then once you're close enough, release your mini turbo and neutral hop, then trick off the ramp and start holding back on the stick. Then land and trick off the second ramp and keep holding back on the stick until you clear the final bit of off-road. And there you go, that's how you perform the Mute City NISC. Now I have one big tip for learning this, and that is to release your mini turbo earlier than you think you should. Because the biggest issue I had when trying to learn this NISC was I would release my mini turbo really late and get no air and lose all my momentum in the off-road. So just remember to neutral drift and stay as close to the wall as possible and release your mini turbo earlier than you think you should. And you should get it. Now let's move on to Shy Guy Falls. Now the Shy Guy Falls NISC is notorious for being very difficult to pull off, but I'm going to show you 3 ways to pull it off, starting with the most difficult way. So, after landing in the little cave, start positioning yourself to the right of the ramp to collect this coin right here. Trick off the ramp and land into a right soft drift to build a mini turbo, then adjust yourself so that you're just to the right of these bushes. Then when you're close enough, release your mini turbo into a left hop to clear the grass and trick off the ramp. Now, this version of the NISC is very difficult to learn and get consistently, but the one tip I have is to release your mini turbo slightly earlier than you think you should, because a common mistake I made was releasing it too late and losing my momentum on the grass before hopping. But now I'll show you how to do the easier method. So, after going off the glider, instead of going into the cave, dive down and start a left drift and soft drift initially, then hold wide to position yourself to the right side of the track. Then release your mini turbo right before the shadow and start a right drift and fully soft drift while in the shadow. And as you're about to come out of the shadow, start holding wide to position yourself for the cut, and you should have enough time to build up an SMT. Then release it into the grass and it will give you enough speed to clear the grass and trick off the ramp. Now, this version of the NISC is slightly slower, but a lot safer and more consistent to pull off, and is still a lot faster than going all the way around. Now here's the third way to pull off this NISC. So this method is pretty much the same as the first one, except you release your mini turbo in the grass instead of before. I only found out about it recently and haven't really tested its consistency, but here's how to do it. So, position yourself on the right side of the ramp and trick off of it and land into a right soft drift to build a mini turbo. Then position yourself to the right of these bushes. Now instead of releasing your mini turbo into a left hop, hold your drift into the grass and release your mini turbo right before passing these 2 rocks. Then hop once to keep some momentum and then trick off the ramp. And there you go, those are 3 ways to perform the Shy Guy Falls NISC. Depending on which method you choose, it can still be a tricky one to learn and pull off consistently, especially because it's at the end of the track. So don't get too down on yourself if you're having a hard time. But yeah, those are some more SHROOMLESS shortcuts to perform in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. There are a couple that I didn't go over because I'm saving them for YouTube Shorts because they're so much easier to explain and don't require this much explanation. Either way, I hope you found this video helpful, and until next time, Godspeed.